Joe Rogan trends on Twitter for telling his audience that video games are a waste of time, causing Ninja, Dr. Lupo, and more to respond to him. G4 TV is rising from the grave, and how will they impact the upcoming esports streaming war? And Nintendo has code for some of its biggest games it's ever made leaked, and it confirms the biggest rumor on the N64 was actually partly true. All that and more next on The Breakdown. It's another weekend in the books, and you've made it. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. And remember, if you're trying to stay up to date on the latest in esports and video game news, hit that subscribe button and join the Checkpoint family. If you've ever got a news story you want us to cover, you can always hit us up on Twitter at CheckpointXP. Without further ado, let's jump into the news. Joe Rogan says games are a waste of time, and streamers respond. The largest podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan, is no stranger to controversy, and he courted it again this past weekend when the newest episode of his podcast launched and contained comments of him speaking on gaming. The week before with Hannibul Burress saw Rogan saying that he possibly had a gaming problem in the past, saying he was essentially addicted to gaming. And this week we saw him saying that games were a waste of time because they are fun, but not as profitable as other hobbies.
And video games are a real problem. They're a real problem. You know why? Because they're fun.
Addictive.
And you don't, I have a real problem with them. And you do them and they're real exciting, but you don't get anywhere.
Right.
It's like you could do like martial arts, right? You could learn jujitsu. You get obsessed by jiu-jitsu, and then 3 years later, you're like an elite jiu-jitsu athlete. You're entering in competitions. You're a purple belt.
You're moving up.
Yeah, you're doing well. Right. You're thinking like, I might be able to open my own school one day.
You got confidence.
Yeah, if I have 100 students and those 100 students are paying me X amount of dollars per month, I can make a living. Holy shit, I can have this would be amazing. And then you see your jiu-jitsu school, and your jiu-jitsu instructor has all these students and drives a Mercedes, and he's got a nice family, and like, that's the future. This way you're doing something exciting and fun, and you don't. Or you could just be playing video games. 3 years later, you could be that same kid just playing video games, waiting for the next whatever the game is, next Xbox game to come out, and you're gonna waste your time.
Now, this is kind of a hot take, but hobbies don't have to make you money for them to be enjoyable and therefore worth pursuing. The entire take is pretty off the wall in my opinion, especially when it's so broad. Video games are able to be a hobby and also make money for people in many, many ways. But regardless of my take on it, Rogan trended on Twitter over the weekend for these comments and more, and he instantly drew out plenty of criticism from people who make far more money than I do playing video games. Out of the gate, Ninja didn't defend Rogan, but said that it was more from a place of just not understanding the video game space than anything else.
I think where he was coming from, or what he was talking about specifically, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but what I watched the whole thing and tried to get context of it. I watched, before and after the clip that was just, being posted on or on Twitter. It sounds like he's talking about like the top 1%, like the very odd or one-off chance that you're going to be a professional player, an esports player, and a successful one at that, right? I mean, you can be a professional esports player and, beyond like a tier 2, tier 3 org, which is not maybe paying you the most. And obviously if you're not winning and being paid a lot, you're not a big streamer, then you're not really making a lot of money. So I'm assuming he's just basically talking about, the top 1%, you're winning every tournament, you're on a top organization, you're making a shitload of money, you're successful. And I mean, he talks about how, gaming can potentially not really get you anywhere, right? You're putting a lot of time into it and you're just mindlessly playing video games. I just don't think what Joe doesn't really understand then the full context of what the gaming community is and how many different avenues you can be successful in gaming.
Dr. Lupo also joined the outcry when he sent a tweet that had a good message in it. Listening to this podcast is a waste of time if it's all you do all day and wait for the next episode. Generalized take is bad. Anything can be harmful in excess. Another day, another large name in pop culture comes forward to admit they just don't know the gaming space. Is Joe Rogan the worst for these comments? Not for those comments. Would I say that you should invite Joe to hang out the next time you are wanting to squat up with your buddies in Warzone? Probably not either. The return of G4 TV in the upcoming esports streaming wars. After exclaiming for years, it's finally time for gamers to put their money where their mouth is, as the return of G4 TV is nigh. The long-deposed TV channel dedicated to gaming teased their return with a trailer that showed up during Comic-Con at home, and instantly set the internet ablaze. Witness the moment that plenty of Attack of the Show fanboys had their heads explode when they saw this announcement. It's unclear what exactly this return will entail, but thus far, Twitter accounts for older G4 shows have been tweeting the trailer and have updated their bios to read, "We'd never stopped playing." Originally launched in 2002, most gamers are familiar with G4, or its predecessor, Tech TV, Leo Laporte, as it was one of the only mainstream sources for video games until it stopped operations in 2014. Although it was effectively dead long before 2014 with lots of Cops reruns, it still had plenty of Attack of the Show, X-Play with Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb, and great coverage of E3 every single year. As for exactly what this is going to be, it's still up for debate. My personal take, I expect it to be a very web-focused thing with minimal, at most, actual TV production. Why? Because this is 2020, and G4 is not the only kid on the block with content creation on its mind. The recent launch of Ven is something that we'll be covering closely, and while there is for sure enough room in the world to have multiple video game-focused streaming services and brands, it's going to come to a head sooner or later. G4 is still being supported by its parent company Comcast and has not announced a roster or lineup of talent, and until then, it's still a lot of guessing until more info comes out. Massive Nintendo leak gives details on early Mario, Zelda, and more. Over a dozen classic Nintendo games, from Super Mario World to a canceled Zelda 2 remake to Super Mario 64 and even The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, were all included in an online leak that dumped so much info on all of these early games, and it's taken people behind the Iron Curtain that is Nintendo and the release of information on games locked away in the vaults of the company. The source code, which is something that the public can't access, and it's usually never seen outside of the developers of these games, also came out for Super Mario Kart, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and Yoshi's Island. This is a metric load of leaked stuff, and that's part of what some experts are pointing to when it comes to validating whether any of this is real. Faking it would be as hard, says Mr. Cheese, a well-known Nintendo hacker. Making it up would require someone to create all these games from scratch, he adds. That would mean coming up with thousands of files, something that would be nearly impossible today. See, it shows you Mario's punching Yoshi. Problem solved. The only thing that really matters here, it looks like Luigi actually was a planned character for Super Mario 64. So that makes that one kid that everybody knew in elementary school that said his uncle worked for Nintendo not a total liar, just a little liar. Way to go, kid. Now for Shenlong to become a boss in Street Fighter 2, and you will have become totally redeemed. That's it for the news today, and thanks so much for hanging out with us. Remember, if there's anything you're dying to see covered, I bet we already have an article written about it. Don't believe me? Just head over to our website, checkpointxp.com, to see if you can prove me wrong. My name's Weirdbeard, and I am too on board the Craig the Brute hype train.